Hello, Sonia. Good to
Hi,
see you
Leonid.
again. Yes, yes, yes.
Good to
So
see you too.
we've got some
Well,
kind of half
yeah,
half the words in the mouth the last time, because the care thing is such an exciting subject, eh?
that's it. Yeah, I wanted to hear more about it.
Well, I guess yeah. Okay, that's a good point because this is really the thing in a way that we have a completely distorted, because the whole field, right? So if we put it probably a little bit on a tangent, so the professional community, if you go to the conferences on the cerebral palsy and so on, has been talking
Okay.
on trying to get something which they call the parent-centric model, right? So for already
Yeah.
quite a while. But unfortunately, that parent-centric model is not working very well, right? Because basically, when it comes to the professionals, they are, even having hard time to identify like what are we going to do to make the parent-centric model. So like, okay, let's make a first step. So start doing the rehab sessions at home instead of dragging, families to the centers and so on and so forth. But the way that I see it, it's really not even that. It's not even the parent-centric rehabilitation. It's the whole sequence of parenting care and rehabilitation where you have to put the care part as a centerpiece, because only within the
Yeah.
care as a centerpiece, that's when the leading role of the parent becomes most natural, because it's the
Yeah, because the other way is just turning the parent into a therapist.
that's it.
And that is very weird for us. But
Yeah,
that is like changing the roles, but it's the same way.
absolutely. And you see, and then it translates into all sorts of other things, right? So you see all the professionals, they kind of complaining, well, parents are not making that much of that good of a therapist, and so on, which is understandable, right? So you see, if you are asked to do the stretching for your child, so this is a very fine balance. So if you underdo it, it's kind of a waste of time, even if in a conventional sense. If you are like overdoing it, you're likely to do the damage, right? But then you have to know that fine limit. And where would you get that knowledge of the fine limit? Because it's your own child, right? So you can't,
Yeah.
disembody the parent from yourself. And if you try to do that, that's actually breaking the bond, right? And so
Yes.
that's really, but that's a separate subject that we'll have kind of, we have to talk a lot further about. But let's get back to the care, right? So let's get back to the care itself. So with care, with the care itself, you already have the allocated time budget. You have a high awareness about it. You have you have established routines and the procedures. So everyone is comfortable about it, right? And then this is really an important thing to say, that to understand that for the child with the cerebral palsy, routines, the secret of success is in better routines. It's not winding through it, not seeing, oh, this is a routine, this is boring, right? So there's all the same story again. Well, like for you, right? What am I doing? I'm feeding Russia, whatever, 4 times a day, and it's all the same thing. Okay, here we are. This is the spoon. I'm just slightly changing the foods and so on. So routines, we are, and that's another point, right? So we are not very well wired for appreciating the routines. We love the novelty, right? So you see, we love the excitement. We love, something new, 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 right? But the compound interest in the child development is earned through the routines. Oops, you've been.
But for instance, if we think about anti-fragile, is it helpful to have some flexibility in those routines?
Well, that's a good point, right? But the first thing is that what scale you're working at on that, right? So because when it comes to the flexibility of the routines, first of all, before getting flexibility of the routines, you have to get routines. So before getting them flexible, and this is also a very important thing, right? Because you have to understand that for a child with cerebral palsy, right? So you see, we're there sensory system being in a kind of continuous high alert, right? So for them, like whether it's the sounds, whether it's the contact, whether it's the sort of sudden movement, a lot of things they can trigger this kind of fight or flight response, and particularly the panic response, right? So that's why the routines are those safe zones when they can switch the guard off. And this is really important, that that the child can switch.
What do you mean about the panic response?
Okay, the panic response is very simple, right? So you see, for instance, if the door bangs, right, and the startle reflex kicks in, what is that? That's what happens, right? That's a panic response.
Okay.
But the panic response, you have to understand that it's not just a short reflex, it's the total, total like switch of the system into this panic mode. It has the corresponding hormonal release, it has the change of the physiology in terms of the heartbeat rates, it has the activation of the different muscle groups and so on. So basically it's a completely, it's a complete different type of response, and it has a long trace. So it has a trace at best, at minimal, that's a 20-30 seconds, trace. Most likely that trace is even longer. So that's why that's why you've seen generally in so many scenarios that children with cerebral palsy, they dislike novelty, right? So anything that comes with novelty is very stressful, because their zone of comfort, their zone of confidence is so small that and on the other hand, the cost of getting out of that zone is so high, right? The risks, right? The fears and so on, they're so high that they are really, introduction of what looks like a small novelty for you becomes a big challenge for them. And that's also the reason why in so many cases, the same parents who talk about the child being lazy and don't want to do the new things and so on and so forth, these same parents, when the child is showing some enthusiasm and showing some new kind of playfulness or activity and so on during, for instance, the feeding time, these same parents see it as an obstacle. So this is, again, the whole system is completely confused and messed up in that sense, that actually misallocating the priorities, misallocating the, what has to be working first, and what are the true predictors of the success, and what are the true drivers of the long-term success. That's what happens when we, confuse the rehabilitation and the care priorities. So getting back to that, right? So talking about the routines and established allocations and the safe environment. So let's take something other than feeding. Let's, for instance, take even such a dirty job, right, as the diaper change. But first of all, once you get there, we start with the context. So what is the context? What is the total setting there? Are you going to take that diaper change as an experience, as an exploration of the child's body and the movement, as the opportunity to connect those quiet moments and that non-verbal communication that can happen with you? Or you're just going to do it and take the old off, wipe the butt clean, put some powder in, close it, off. So that's really the case. So it all starts with the whole context, because the context for a child with cerebral palsy has a dramatic influence on their tone. Which mode are they going to be in? So good things happen to them when their panic, protection, fight or flight modes are off. only then the good things happen to them. Only then they can explore, they can get some creativity, they can get some experience of the right type of the physiology behind it. Because again, what we see as the movement is just the tip of the iceberg, right? So that iceberg underneath it has the physiology, has the hormonal base behind it. So anytime there is a stressful experience, there is a hormonal and the physiological thing comes in it. And that becomes the base of it. So it's the routine opportunities, because they are safe, they are known, they are already pre-experienced. That's why they are the ones when you have those windows of the good physiology related to movements, good physiology related to responses, good physiology related to the sensory interactions and so on. So it's really an extremely valuable openings. Again, things even so mundane as the diaper change. But then once we move to the next level, right? So you see, let's take it this way. So it's the whole thing. Okay, we're going to get like the diaper change. There's a certain position there. So right away we have to pay attention to details. Because even in the healthy kids, because nowadays, especially in the Western countries, you have the situation that a lot of kids, they are wearing the diapers until they're 2 or 3 years of age, right? So it's like when we were in Russia, we used to do the potty training at the 6 months or 7 months, right? So you see, it was like that. So but anyway, but what happens, you see, like just to get the idea of the context, because if you are changing it, for instance, on a bed, right, or on a even on the diaper changing, usually you become the slave to your routines. Again, routines are good for the child from the safety, but it's bad for your attention span, because you are switching into the attention, into this thing. So what I was saying is that, like, because for instance, that changing table has a particular location, right? So like, for instance, if there's like facing the wall, right, it's at the wall. So what does it mean? And the light is coming from one side. So what typically happens, you would you have a stronger hand than the weaker, the weaker hand and the stronger hand. So what typically is going to happen, a parent puts the child in a fixed position, like in a same position, so the same placement, the head is always the same way, the legs are always the same way. You take a preferred location, which leg you're going to move first. Then you have a very, like efficient movement, unzipping, let's say unstacking the diaper. Then, wipe it from the, again, a very clear same movement, and then you close it. But that fact alone, if you look at the fact that the child, even a healthy child, being pulled by the same leg through the several years of changing diapers, even that is a tendency that can create significant asymmetry. Imagine what happens to a child with, disability with a CP who is already having those asymmetries there. So that's the context, that's the awareness, how you approach it, how attentive you are, and how ready you are to to get some transition, so that today we're going to put the head, instead of going towards the window, we'll put it towards the door, right? And then even I'm not...
That's very difficult for me. If you shift Rocio, I don't know what to do. It's very, very difficult.
Exactly. But this is, but that's why, I'm just telling you how many nuances are there, right? So that in itself, it's a training, it's the engagement, because, you have such a strong automatic way of doing it already. So just a little shift, again, just changing the way how the head is positioned and how you should reach already confuses you, right? So, but
yeah.
Well, but that's exactly the point. It just shows you how many opportunities for adjustments are there, right? And then the same story, when you start moving the leg, what are the first things that you're doing? Where are you getting your touch? whether you're waiting long enough, let's say for to get to enter into the system, because any kind of immediate fast entry, you see that if you do it something a little bit faster, what happens for her? She first gets tense, right? Or, for instance, when she's excited, right? So you see the whole thing also comes into it. So it's the whole timing of waiting for the moments when you can actually find the quiet moment, when you have the opportunity to get the leg moving without the resistance, to get this, so then, to balance the two legs, to get some extra activities like, whatever, get a little bit of rocking, get a little bit of these things. Because you see, fact is, the child who is wearing the diaper, it's completely missing also it's missing sensory field there, right? So therefore, things like just a basic, refreshment, massage, points of contact, and so on, getting some air exposure to it, and getting this type of thing. So that's already a big sensory point, because on the other hand, we are all worried about the hip flexor contractures, we are worried about the adductor contractures and so on, but then we ourselves create the situation when all the surrounding tissues are not being present on the sensory map. So these simple considerations, the moment you zoom into it, you start seeing all these nuances which are building around the thing which is such a mundane thing as the diaper change. So that's again just an example for you to review those activities. Think about the context, where the things are positioned, what you can change, what are the slight things that you can change. Because also the same thing with the feeding, the way that you put the feeding chair towards the light, what kind of preferences it creates for the position of the head, and what are the preferred directions. All these things matter. That's a compound interest. So I want you to start thinking there in terms of the compound interest. All these small actions matter, accumulate, and so on. So that's a central message about the care. The care is the process through which you get the compound interest, and it's through that, whether through the care procedures, through the care routines, which actually define whether your compound interest is going to be building up in the good way, and is going to be the earning interest, right? So that your account balance of developmental account balance of a child is growing, or whether it's going to be the credit card interest, which is going to mean that the developmental account balance is actually going to be gradually drained. So that's...
But to be practical, once I have the routine and I have the ability already to zoom in, what should I be aiming for her to be relaxed?
Well, I think that this is a good question. So because that will be actually the discussion of the participation at the more detailed level, and we'll save that for our next episode.
Perfect. See you then. Thank you.
See you then. Bye.